All right, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Working Enneagram podcast, where our goal here is that you would use the Enneagram to grow in self-awareness and appreciation of personality differences. Today on the show, my guest is Jeff Cook, and we'll be talking about Jeff's third book. It's called Around the Circle, co-written by TJ Wilson. Jeff, welcome. I'm so glad to have you on.
Kelsey, I'm thrilled. Thank you for hosting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I want to dig into the book, but before we just jump right in, I'd love for the audience to get to know you a little bit better. So let's start off with a fun fact about you and what you do for work.
Yeah. Fun fact: I have two kids. I live in Colorado. I taught philosophy for 12 years at the University of Northern Colorado. Fun fact: I probably could have been an Olympic skier, but didn't go down that road. But I am suffering from it now. My knees are destroyed, and that has caught up with me. The moguls have caught up with me, unfortunately. So, fun fact is I have pivoted from running, biking, and skiing to weightlifting here in recent years.
I love knowing that about you. What caused the pivot, out of curiosity?
Well, I have. If you were to look at my knees, there's no cartilage in them, and so it's mostly pain. Just mostly pain. That I can actually still ski just fine. I just can't go down some of the stuff that I used to really enjoy. So
yeah, pain is a good motivator to shift gears.
Yeah. Okay. Try something else. Apparently,
Absolutely. So, how did you get into the Enneagram?
Had a mystical experience in 2016. My stepfather died. My job really wasn't going well. I had strong ambitions that I was supposed to be an author, and I just couldn't sell anything. But I got onto a podcast that I loved, and the guy interviewed me, and I listened to myself afterwards, and I was raw. I didn't have the reps doing podcast work. You'll know this is important. And I was terrible. It was one of those places that I just kind of cracked. I was like, I'm never going to do this. And I'm not sure what I'm doing with my life. And what happened was the podcast I was on rolled to the next podcast. And the next podcast was him interviewing a woman the week before on a topic I never would have listened to. I would never have listened to the interview for any reason. The name itself would have immediately turned me off. But it rolled in this place where I was really depressed. It rolled into this other podcast, and the voice on the other end was an older woman from North Texas. And she started talking about Enneagram 1s because the podcast host had a wife who was an Enneagram 1. And my family is from southern Oklahoma. And my beloved grandmother, who had passed 15 years earlier, had nearly the identical voice and very likely a very similar Enneagram type. And as I was listening to this woman, I was like, that's my grandmother. And I started hearing this woman tell me who I was. And in this place where I was kind of shattered, I'm hearing the voice of my beloved grandmother say, this is your heart, and this is why you're self-critical, and this is what your best qualities are. And all of a sudden I was like, I didn't know what to do with myself, aside from I went and bought the woman's book. That's about the best I could do. And then I bought the book. I went to the coffee shop that I co-owned, and the guy who is the other owner of the coffee shop was sitting at his table being lazy like normal. But this time, actually, he was reading a book by a Franciscan, and on the front it said Enneagram. And my book said Enneagram. I was like, hey. And then we started a conversation, and he knew way more about Enneagram than I did. And I was so jazzed by all the things he was saying. I was like, this is great. We got to get this on tape. And that man is TJ Wilson. We started a podcast, and then like me doing my Enneagram introduction and getting into it came through actually like these early podcast recordings of me just learning. And that's a long story, but it was much more of a conversion experience than anything else that I've, had. So yeah, long story short.
Great story. Would that woman happen to be Suzanne Stabile?
It would.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I try not to name drop as Stabile as much, just because she's been so influential to so many people. I'm just like, yeah, me too, kind of thing.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm in a cohort right now with her daughter, Joey
Oh,
Dewey, and I
yeah,
know
yeah,
you had Joey on the
we
podcast
have.
and Billy,
Yep,
her
yep.
husband. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in my view, I think that Joey's the best in the world right now at at the theory side. I think that she's remarkably talented, and so
She
that's a
said
good person to stay with.
she is. She said some wonderful things about you guys too. She's promoting the podcast, so I think
Oh,
that
good,
feeling is very mutual.
wonderful. Did you by chance, are you in a cohort with Katie Whitlock, who's a
I am.
3?
Yes.
Katie and I are starting some work together. She's going
There,
to be. We're starting an Enneagram channel for our podcast, and we're going to add some podcasts and try and do more YouTube stuff. But she and I have been connected and trying to do stuff and stuff. So that's excellent. Small world.
yeah, I love that. A 1 and a 3. Y'all are going to get some
Yep,
amazing things done. I love
that's
that.
right. What do you say? So my wife's a 3, so I'm like the language and rhythms of 3s are just, I just love the hell out of 3s most of the time, and so yeah, so she's a delight to
Yeah.
work with.
Well, I love that you mentioned you were on a podcast
Yeah,
and, in your opinion, it went awful.
went
And
off.
now I believe you have 3 podcasts that you're just killing it
We
right
do.
now. Okay. Okay. Tell me about
Yeah.
those.
So our main feed is Around the Circle, which is an Enneagram podcast, and this is where we do mostly. We for a long time we're doing theory and trying to get our own heads around a lot of the topics that we are putting in this book that's being released. Recently, we have shifted to doing a lot more interviews. It's become one of those things where we feel like we have enough of the foundation where we just want to start elevating other voices who are very, very informed. And actually, a big part of our work now is connecting with people who are content creators and asking the question, what is next in Enneagram world? I have a strong intuition that the wave that kind of really crested with Road Back to You and Suzanne Stabile's work has kind of run its course.
Mhm.
And publishers know this. There are people like her co-author, Ian Cron, has moved on to writing on other topics now.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of done its thing there. But Enneagram comes in waves. And I'm really interested in what the next wave is. And I'm really interested in the people who are going to be part of it. And I think that there's going to be a lot there's going to be a different element, a different quality and heartbeat and focus of this next wave that's coming. And so most of my work is presently anticipating that, like where are we going, y'all? And I've had terrible luck connecting with people in the last wave. Like we have we have 1 million downloads on our podcast. We have almost 10,000 listeners. Nobody wants to talk to us. I don't get it. So, but who does want to talk to us are the
I
people doing the new thing, the people who are coming up. And so, like, I'm like, I think that's our thing now. So, we are trying our best to elevate the voices of people who are content creators who are probably under the age of 40, and have just been doing it since COVID, and that's kind of our person right now.
I love it. I love it. One question I know
Yeah.
before we dive into the book is I love asking this question. How do you know beyond the shadow of a doubt that you are an Enneagram type 1?
How do I know this? Well, the language that I really connect with ends
Mhm.
up being I connect with the language of taking the world in through my intuitions. I connect with the language of coping style and solving problems with a pivot towards my head. I
Mhm.
connect with the idea that when I'm in friendships and want to connect with other people, I pull them into action.
Mhm.
I really connect with the stress move. I think one of the best ways to type people is to talk about stress moves. And so the movement away from action into a place that is much more emotional past for focused and shame oriented is something I experience in stress. Those are
Mm-hmm.
things that really hit me. A lot of people, when I first got into it, were very curious if I was a 5, and that, so I'm a philosopher, I'm thinking through things, and that was just an easy. And so figuring out that element of why I was not a 5 was a big part of my early journey, and these were the sorts of answers that came out. So yeah. So
Absolutely.
how about
Yep.
yourself? Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. But the being a little judgmental, that one stung.
Mm,
That's number one on the checklist in the
yeah.
road back to you. And I remember thinking like, whoa, you could have put that at least a little bit lower down the list. Like, let me warm up to that. It just right out the get go. um, I have high integrity, high moral standards, and I like to pull people into that moral standard. I
Yeah.
resonate with the stress move. One question I have about that, Joey Shui teaches that in the stress move, you can go to the low side, but you can also intentionally choose the high side. Have you
Yeah.
experienced that?
Yeah. When, in our view, the high side, low side is a fantastic way of talking about all of the elements of the Enneagram. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not just your center, and it's not just your stress move. Your security move has this element. And I think your affect has this element. I think your coping style has this element. I think your stance has this element, where there are healthy expressions of your type and there are unhealthy expressions of your type. So when talking about low and high side, it's of that nature. So the thing about the stress move that like true repair and restoration often comes for us, in my experience, in our move into our stress number and seeking the high side. So for you and I, the move into 4 space, where we are asking very introspective questions, where we are examining where we've been, where we are, 4s are, have a great tool there that they can be less judgmental, as it were, of
Mm-hmm.
themselves and see themselves in the beauties of the whole, as it were, like that they have a unique part to play in the bigger picture when they're very healthy.
For
And
sure.
those are the sorts of things I think that ones can grab there in 4 space that can be very valuable among other things. So
100%. That's beautifully said. I've noticed with my high side of 4, sometimes there's songs that I'll write, poetry comes out. Do you see any of those creative elements? I mean, writing a book, I think, is a creative element in itself. But,
yeah, my high side 4 for me comes out most when I'm done with work
mm-hmm.
and move to my kitchen and have the opportunity to listen to melancholy music. The music I choose, and I think this is true of a lot of types if you're not a 1. I think the music that you might associate with your stress number may be a great place to go. So my son is a 5. My son listens to very spastic, energetic music when downtime hits, and that
Mm-hmm.
makes all the sense in the world. They wants to go to his like high side 7. What does that look like for the 5? And that, there it is. It's this, it's like Japanese ska, and and you're like, well, that's a selection, isn't it? And so for me, it's like this nostalgic 90s,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I would name some artists, but I would feel embarrassed. But like the catalog of my high school experiences.
Absolutely.
That music is just restorative. And so I'm creating things with food. I'm enjoying them physically, but
Mm-hmm.
mentally and emotionally, I'm going to those places. And hopefully, the music is bringing out the richness of the delights of where I've been. Music can, do this of, oh, this is the song I listened to at this point in time, and it was very evocative
Yeah.
of past memory. And if you can get to there as a 1, if you can get to the appreciation and delight in your past memories,
Mm-hmm.
that's high side 4 space, because 4s are entirely past oriented and 1s are entirely present oriented. So what's easiest for us is you and I know if we are getting into the past, we have entered our stress move. If you and I are moving into the future and saying, what am I doing next? Oftentimes that is, we know that we're kind of in that secure space, especially if it's the dreaming, ambition, mental side of the future, then you know you're in security. And so ones have a handy little tool here in that, you can, if you find yourself naming the temporal space that you're entering, you can self-consciously ask the question, what's an unhealthy 4 look like? What does a healthy 4 look like? And then, so it's not so much, you can't control if you're going into your stress move, but you can control, like, if you're going to go high, if you're going to go low, because there's tools there to use. So that's some of my view on that.
I love it. That's awesome. That's good.
Thanks.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book a little bit.
Yeah.
Who is this book written for?
This book is written for somebody who wants to do a little bit deeper dive into Enneagram. We're setting up the first book, like a lot of Enneagram books, we're setting up the first book as a typology study. But we are adding two categories that really aren't talked about very often. So the book is set up around 9 questions. Who am I? What do I want? How do I get what I want? Where do I struggle most? What are the biggest obstacles that I have? How do I connect with people? How do I solve problems? What are my gifts? Those are so it's structured around 9 questions. There's a lot of books that will talk about your type and your center, heart type, body type, head type. And a lot of books will talk about the underlying feelings that we have of shame, fear, and anger. A lot of books will talk about your stance, and that some people are aggressive and independent. Some people are withdrawn. Some people are more reactive, like you and I are, that we earn things. And so sitting in the centers and stance is real common. There's 2 other big sets of triads that don't get teased out very often, and it's affect groups and coping styles. Affect groups is how you connect with the world. There are some Enneagram theorists like Dr. David Daniels who start here, who want to say this is the most important element of yourself. Most of that is because he's a clinical psychologist and he really likes behavioral science and being able to see things. And our Enneagram type is very visible here in terms of how you try to connect with other people. So for you and I, we are idealists. We are trying to pull people into action. 7s try and pull people into their thoughts. 4s try and pull people into their emotions. This would be one of the places that we really tried to focus was this set of angles of how do you connect with people. And then a second set of triads is called coping styles, which is like the problem solving elements of the Enneagram. So again, you and I are the same. We shut down our emotions and we try to think about what's right to do. So notice it's thinking. We're engaging the head in problem solving, and we're still sitting in the center of, we're still active. We're part of the body triad. We're going to try and execute what is right to do. We share this with 3s and 5s. 3s and 5s also, when problem solving, are shut down their emotional center and try and solve the problem. So 3s are going to aim at the goal. 5s are going to aim at the data. We're going to aim at what's right. These sorts of things are really worth naming. So those 4 sets of triads, center, stance, coping style, affect groups, this is how we constructed our typology. And we think that these are the best ways to understand what your type is. If you understand these 4 big elements of yourself, you're going to know a lot about Enneagram. We think wings should be set aside. We think that your dominant instinct subtypes, those should be set aside. We think stress and security moves, those need to wait till later. You should focus here, these 4 things, and you should elevate. Our last chapter is on your gifts. So like, what do you as a 1 uniquely contribute to the world? Let's elevate that. Let's remind you why your type is not a negative, why your type actually has a profoundly beautiful element to it that you need to know. So that, because if you don't embrace the beauties, the glories of your type, you're robbing the rest of us of all that you have to contribute. And that's kind of where we end. So.
Yeah. I love that you end with that too. I feel like it's just a positive little wrap up. So, would you briefly go over the gifts of all 9 types?
Yeah. I mean, so just kind of from memory, it's just here, it's mostly like, what do you see in these types that really is glorious? So, twos end up bringing a lot of external energy to the world. They're meeting you. They're elevating your concerns and how they can participate in them. This is a treasure to a lot of us.
Mhm.
Threes, as was said, can one of the things about threes is that they can quickly pivot off of things that are really hard and feel depressing and say, stand up, little kid, we're going someplace amazing, and energize the next thing. Fours can meet us in places where we cannot move, where we're really struggling emotionally. Fours can meet us in those spaces and sit with us and not feel like things need to change until it's the case that it's time for things to change. And that's a superpower.
Mhm.
Fives routinely do a great job of actually analytically, surgically saying, here's what's going on in the world around us that we need to know, understand, so that we can be safe, have what we need locked down. And the understanding that fives bring, not only, I suppose, of the threats that are out there, but oftentimes fives can be the best kind of voices for some of us who want to hear an honest opinion about what's
Mhm.
going on in our world. Sixes are obviously always on the lookout for what's going to get us. And this can be a true treasure because some of us are idiots, when it comes to thinking about what could go wrong. I'm an idiot when, nothing's going to go wrong. I'm an idealist. I'm pushing all the chips onto red 10. What could possibly go wrong? And the six will come in and say, so here's something that you should probably pause on for a minute before we move any further. And that is a true gift. The loyalty of the six, the compassion of the six, in my experience, the warmth of sixes, all just a delight. Sevens don't necessarily want to pull you into action. What sevens want to do is they want to pull your mental life into places that aren't bogged down with grief and with the troubles, as it were. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. You need somebody to speak over you some optimism and do so in a way that truly pivots your mental life. Sevens are also fantastic scholars, fantastic at envisioning the possibilities, giving us new ways of thinking about old topics. Love the hell out of sevens on these fronts.
Mhm.
Eights obviously have if you're a friend of an eight will, I had one friend who's an eight say, in essence, if somebody truly opposed you, I know where to bury bodies. It's the loyalty at that level of, of you are not going to suffer while I'm around.
Mhm.
And it can be incredibly valuable. The energy of the eight to remind you that you have all the strength you need to do this, but
Mhm.
you need to do this. And I'm sick of hearing your excuses. That can be a treasure.
Yes.
Nines can be fantastic in terms of, I use my nine as a translator. My co-author, TJ Wilson, will explain to others what I'm actually trying to say,
Mhm.
because I will come across as a not very self-aware one at times whose words can be easily misunderstood. And nine will come in and say, well, this is what he's really saying, and
Mhm.
kind of soften things up a bit. He's an ambassador, as it were, and will often be the one to say, you are taking yourself too seriously, and
Mhm.
let's pull this back a little bit. And ones execute, ones get jobs done, ones enter spaces and say, you know what the 5-8 and 3 said were the best things to do, they're entirely right. So let's do it. And the ones end up bringing so much of, like, I find this, I think threes and ones, it looks like eights are this person, but they're not. Threes and ones are actually the ones who get things done. Like, if you like truly drive things forward, those two numbers have more skill than any at execution. And so those are some of the gifts. We could spend an entire chapter on this, but those are things that come to mind.
Yes, no, I love that. That was perfectly said. I'm curious on the 1 and the 3 getting things done and 8. Would you say 8s don't quite match that getting things done because they are telling people the things to get done? Is that the differentiator there?
I think that 8s think they get things done, and they probably do. They get things done that they want to get done. I think that 1s and 3s probably have a slightly more of a radar toward what other people want, and will allow the social pressures to influence their amount of get it doneness. Part of 8ness is not just I want to execute in the world, but part of 8ness is I want to ensure that I'm not vulnerable. And so they get things done, but sometimes it's very self-protective in nature. Sometimes it's I was able to put up a big fat fence and that's what got done. And now I'm going to sit behind my fence and not have to listen to you or act with you anymore, as it were. Whereas the 1 and 3s generally have different kinds of goals. So I suppose that's what I was kind of implying. Yeah. But all 3 are going to find a lot of their value in what they achieve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. I want to go back to the 9 questions. In the book, is there one of those 9 questions that you tend to favor or that you like more than the other questions?
The newest material that we do builds actually on the work of Innate. That we first heard this from Erica Jobs, who has a podcast called The Real Enneagram. She did for a while. It got taken over by somebody else. Erica showed us that, each of the types end up engaging time. And often when talking about orientation to time, Enneagram thinkers have talked about your stance. So if you're a 3, 7, or 8, you have a future-oriented perspective. Like you are solving problems tomorrow. And you're like, what do I need to do tomorrow to ensure that I get what I want? For us, 1s, 2s, and 6s, we're in the present. This is why we're reactive. Where so much of our stuff is right now. And for 4s, 5s, and 9s, they're employing past tools to get what they want. They're bringing forth the past emotions, the past thoughts, the past trinkets, objects of memory for the 9, that make them feel comfortable. So when talking about orientation of time, it's often around stance. What we do in this book is say there's another orientation of time, and it's through your center. So you actually take in the world through a temporal filter, and then you engage the world through a temporal tools. So if you are a head type, notice this, if you're a head type, you will notice that you are anticipating what's in the future. So 5s, 6s, and 7s all have an anticipatory perspective on the world, what might get us. Because of that, they're going to experience an underlying feeling of fear. Fear is about what might happen. And 5, 6s, and 7s all have the same fear. It looks like you only see it in the 6s. 5s have the identical fear. 7s have the identical fear as the 6s because they're taking in the world through their head. They solve the problem of fear in 3 very different ways, and all of these are temporal. So the 5 is going to pull on their resources, on what they've accumulated in order to meet the fears that they have. So they're taking in the world through the future and what might happen, but they're addressing the fears of what might happen through these temporal tools that they have, through their assets, their resources, their knowledge. And that's how 5s are in the world. That explains a lot of 5ness right there. 6s, and 6s are the easiest to see here, they have that fear of what might get them. They can't pull on past tools. They don't have past tools like 5s do. They only got tools right now. And the tools they got right now is to look around and say, who's beside me? Who can I rely on? Who can I ask their thoughts about this thing that might get us? Same fear, but the tool that the 6 has to employ is a present-oriented tool. And so that's why their stance ends up being this very external, a lot of external energy, a lot of who's on my team, a lot of who sees the same problems I do. 7s end up having future tools. They see future problems, but their tools are like, okay, well, there's this future thing. So I need to make sure that next Wednesday I don't get got by the future thing. And so the 7 is saying, where can I jump? What is how many different opportunities can I have if the thing actually comes after me, And so the sevens tool is to, in some ways, set aside their fear. A lot of sevens are oblivious to their anxiety because they put so much of their energy into scheming. What's next? Where can I go next? Why would I want to sit in this place of thinking about fear? And again, the feeling repression comes in here. And they pivot towards what's next. So anyway, we do that around the circle with all 9 types. And so body types are responding to their anger. Anger is about controlling the present. Heart types are about the past. Heart types take in the world through a past filter that is colored with shame and where they were rejected relationally in the past. And the 2, 3, 4 are all motivated to never, ever, ever feel that way again. Well, 4s can kind of, maybe they'll sit in that for a little bit. Right. But there is a sense of how 2s, 3s, and 4s deal with their shame that's very interesting. So 3s are, I'm going to win tomorrow, so I don't feel the shame anymore. 2, I'm going to respond to you right now, so I don't feel the shame that I felt in the past. And then the 4s have that they're using past tools, romantic ideals to address their shame. Anyway, that's the freshest stuff I think that's in the book, and I really enjoy that material.
Absolutely. So you can see, for those of you who are watching, how this book is for those who want to go deeper. Jeff, you're doing such a good job of explaining. I think you're giving maybe too much away. People won't even have to read it at the end of this, but it's such a good example.
It took us 10 hours to read the book. So we've spent 20 minutes on it. There's so much in it's actually really hefty. I was surprised at how thick this book came out. It's, by the way, it's going to release on June 20th, just in case, and it's only on Amazon.
Awesome.
But it's thick.
It's good though. It's so good. What you just talked about was probably one of my biggest takeaways and one of my biggest insights, and one of the biggest things that was valuable to me, because I am married to a 2. Yeah. I learned that shame, that past-oriented shame, really shows up for him. And so we had good conversations around this. And he said, yeah, I experienced it more early in the marriage. Before I knew the Enneagram, I was very harsh, very judgmental, for sure. Yeah. All the things that once you learn the Enneagram, you're like, oh, wow, not everybody sees the world the same way. And you see some of those rougher sides to your personality type. And he said there is some shame that I experienced from early in our marriage that I bring to the present to help you so that I can earn your favor and make sure I'm not making you mad. And all of that is happening on autopilot. And so that was such a gift to us to kind of have really good conversations and hopefully give him some affirmation that he's fine. He doesn't have to pull from that shame. So
especially in our third book, I don't know if this got on, but our 4th book is going to be on chemistry. It's going to be on relationships. And this is one of the places I too really have benefited from this material, is knowing that my wife is always thinking about next Wednesday. And I'm just like, and I'm never thinking about next Wednesday. So her energy towards getting Wednesday solved right now can be actually a real source of conflict for us. Sure. It's like, no, I got to do this, and this before I can get to your thing down the road. Whereas it's just not how she functions. So, but being able to name that, dialogue about it, super helpful.
Yeah. And that's the 4th book you said?
4th book that we do is going to be on relationships and chemistry. And it's going to use a lot of this triad language and say, okay, so for example, you're a body type, you're married to a heart type. That in and of itself, there's a ton to talk about, because you're going to experience an underlying feeling of anger, and your spouse is going to experience an underlying feeling of shame. And those are 2 very different motivators. And you and I, as ones, are not going to be able to understand the level and power of shame in the same way as the 2 does. And so too, the sorts of self-criticism that you and I can abuse ourselves with, this is going to be invisible to heart types in our lives, even though they can say, yes, I kind of get it. You're angry at yourself. And so, but having language for that creates empathy, creates a way of, so my wife understanding this is able to speak into my world, things I probably really need to hear that of course I'm never going to hear from the inner criticism.
Right.
I need voices that counteract that. And, so too what does the two need? That unconditional, you are needed despite anything you could ever possibly do for me, needs to be a message that's constant for the two. And
Absolutely.
so being able to meet people there really matters.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this a little off air at the beginning, but I'd love for you to run through the book series and what
Yep.
each of them covers if you're up for it.
So the big idea for us with the book series is that the last big study on Enneagram was done by Don Riso and Russ Hudson. It's called The Wisdom of the Enneagram. That's really the last big study that was done. And this is like 35 years old. So there's a lot of stuff in Enneagram world that like we know now that wasn't in that book. And a lot of times actually their book is the one that's getting critiqued by a lot of present contemporary understanding. So it's just time to do a new big study. And so that's what we were seeking to do. So our first book is on typology. It's like, here are the 9 types, and here are 9 questions for each of the types and how they are all different. And there's a huge appendix in the back that's going to be mistyping charts. So if you're looking for your type, that's going to be there. Our second book is going to be called The Steps. And we've outlined 7 steps. Like once you know your type, what do you do with this stuff anyway? And so moving from knowing your type to, talking with others, to really addressing your shadow, to elevating, what the high points are of your type, those sorts of things are things that we are going to engage in that second book. And so it's going to be very, very practical as opposed to this first book, which is a lot of theory and a lot of observation. Our third book is called Finding Rhythm, and it's going to be bringing in some of the elements of Enneagram that we haven't gotten a chance to talk about. So stress and security moves are probably going to make up most of this book. The instincts, dominant instincts, subtypes, that sort of stuff. We will be talking about wings, though we think that wings are probably the least important elements of Enneagram. We're going to spend a lot of time on wings because wings can be really, really helpful if you're really, really knowledgeable about Enneagram and you want to do some shadow work, because the shadow side of your wing is really worth naming. So that sort of thing. And just what does it look like for you to be centered in your type? So I said this off mic, but for you and I as ones, we're not made to be 7s. And it would be horrible if we like landed and we're always in 4 space. Well, we're made to be as 1s. And what does it look like for you to be 1 healthy in your oneness? That's really the focus there. So fourth book, as was said, was about chemistry and relationships. And so there's going to be a lot of pairing all the ideas together and seeing what happens. And then our last book is called The Art of Happiness. And that's going to be an exploration of virtue and thriving in your type. So
yeah, I'm excited. That is a phenomenal lineup. So you said
thank you.
probably releasing maybe 1 year at a time. That's the
Yeah.
idea.
My hope is that we can do like a summer study each year moving through. I may take 2 years for the last book, but I think we can kick out a book a year and then just have a good thick study. And that would be our contribution here to Enneagram world.
I love it. I love it. Why would you say wings are not as important of a place to focus as some of the others?
Yeah, wings aren't really about your motive. Wings are much more tools to employ, but they're not even helpful tools half the time. And sometimes wings actually kind of get in the way. So naming your wing doesn't tell you about your motive. It doesn't tell you about your filter. It doesn't tell you about how you naturally engage the world. It doesn't tell you how you problem solve or connect with other people. What wings do is say your number is next to these other numbers, and sometimes you have a little bit of the same qualities. So it's almost like the least interesting thing. So one of the real missteps for a lot of us when we got into Enneagram was to get over into the nuances of the type. So I'm a 1, wing 2, I'm a sexual subtype, and my stack looks this way. And you get into these like self-descriptions that at the end of the day, let's name it. It is pure narcissism at some level. I want other people to see me and how special I am because these are the 28 subdivisions that I got. And at some point, you're just not using the tool. So focus. Here's your type. Let's just spend some time on your type and really what it means for you to be a 1. You know, and so you're taking the world through your body, you're experiencing anger, you're engaging the world with a reactive stance. You're going to be thinking repressed. You're going to connect to people by pulling them into action, and you're going to solve problems with a very thoughtful sort of problem-solving way of being in the world. That's just a quick rundown of what we would say in the book about 1s, but that is 5 years of work. If you really wanted it, you know, just spending time on your repressed center, just spending time saying, I'm thinking repressed. What does that mean? And what do I do about it? And how does it affect my relationships? And how do I become a healthier person? That is almost a lifetime of work. Just dealing with your anger is a lifetime of work. Knowing that you have a wing 2, this is not a lifetime of work. This is just, it's a wrinkle in how you interact sometimes. It would be my view. So
yeah, I love it. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So you have this brilliant analogy, or I think it's brilliant, of yeah, you're welcome. The Enneagram being kind of like a microscope, a magnifying glass, and a telescope.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to explain how does that relate to Enneagram work?
Yeah. So right up front, naming that you're a head type, heart type, body type, this matters. Before you even get into the 9 different divisions, we could just sit there, just 3 divisions that some people take in the world in a very emotional, past-oriented way. Some people take the world in through a very heady, future-oriented way. Some people take in the world for a very intuitive, present-oriented way. The way we take in the world is seldom named in our culture. Like, where do you actually discuss how you receive the world? You know, some people will say, you know, these are the glasses I wear, or sometimes actually in a culture like ours, your gender affects how you see the world, your race affects how you see the world. Oftentimes recently, our generation affects how we see the world. Sometimes your geography does. So if you say for myself, I'm a white male from Colorado, I'm educated, and I'm Gen X, that might tell you quite a bit about the values that I bring to experience. So too, Enneagram, and perhaps even more depthy is Enneagram in that intuitive, sentimental, cognitive glasses really affect how you see the world. And so it may be the case that you and your husband, he's a heart type, you're a body type, are looking at different worlds because you've been handed a microscope. And so you're really concerned with the microscopic, and he's been handed a telescope and he's really concerned with the galactic. And when you come to the world and you say, this is what I'm seeing, and he says, this is what I'm seeing, and you're just like, I think we're seeing 2 different worlds. Yes. You are seeing 2 different worlds because the filter that is you, this is in philosophy, this is called epistemology. Like the framework through which you see the world is fundamentally different. And so what Enneagram does is it names, here are the glasses. Here's the glasses and what they not only say about the world you see, but also you and your priorities. Like if you are looking through a microscope, your priorities are going to be filtered as this thing is what matters. So for you and me, it's like, what are we doing? Is what matters. And the 2 in your life and the 3 in my life, that is not the thing. It's what do these people think about me is what matters. And so like we are going to be speaking at cross purposes if we don't understand, here's my glasses, here's your glasses. They're very different. Let's communicate our differences in ways that are constructive and that we can actually, love each other through our differences and become complementary. That is the art of living right there.
That's the art of the Enneagram too.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. I Another analogy that I really loved was the racetrack. And we've got our starting point. We've got our.
You're the one. Okay, so this got cut. You're
Did
going to be Kelsey, you are going to be the only person in the world that's going to not only have read this, but will have enjoyed it. I enjoyed it and I could not make it work. But
Fair.
for the sake of your podcast, I'll try and play out the metaphor. I would love to hear what you think about it because we were like, this is so confusing. Big idea being you take in the world through your center
Mm-hmm.
and then you process it, you distill it down into information and engage through your stance.
Mm-hmm.
And then your affect kicks in and your affect actually directs that energy and then you act. But after you act, something happens, and we don't often name this. It's that your center kicks in again and it assesses your actions. So you did something in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and now your center takes over again and says, well, did I accomplish the thing I wanted to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you're taking it in through that same set of glasses and your
Mm-hmm.
stance kicks in again and it distills what you did. And then it acts again, through your affect.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like a racetrack, you're just constantly kind of going around in the circle of perception, as it were.
Yeah.
And that's there, you can't escape that circle, but that is you taking in the world, distilling it down to information, deciding what you're going to do, acting in the world, and then reassessing, and then just circle.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
I did. I loved it. I thought the only thing that was frustrating to me was that there's no finish line. Like, to me, I love the idea of completion.
Right.
We get to the finish line, but this is Enneagram work. We're constantly always working through things. We never arrive.
I'll tell you where you could build off it, because the finish line at some level is getting your motive fulfilled. So when you begin to act, what you're aiming at is getting your motive fulfilled. So if you actually, through perception, understand, oh, I improved the thing, something happens in your type. You get to go onto a different track.
Mm-hmm.
And that track is, for you, is called the 7 track. And you get to be there for a minute. You don't get to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
But you do get to enjoy it for a nice little country drive. There's martinis over there. There's like a great horror film. There's all sorts of really exciting experiences. There's Japanese ska music, as was mentioned. But then, you get to be there for one loop, and then you come back to your track. And that's in essence how security moves kind of work, is, did I get my motive fulfilled?
Yeah. That feels complete to me. So thank you. I love it.
I suppose the stress move could work the same way. If you if everything breaks and you can't even finish the line, like they shift your car to a different track. Like, well, can you go around this track and use other people's tools?
Makes sense. Love it.
Anyway.
So
now I'm bummed that didn't make the book. You're convincing me. This was a mistake to cut. We did a different metaphor.
Do you remember what that metaphor was?
I do. Yeah, we called it the Perch. So I seriously spent a month on this silly 4 pages of the book. This was by far the hardest part. It's right in dead center. It's probably the most important thing in the book, and that's why it took so long. But we called it the Perch. Imagine a military commander, and she is assessing the battlefield, and she is hearing reports from the battlefield. That is your center. The reports that are coming in are your center.
Mm-hmm.
The commander gets to choose where they're going to stand in engaging the battle. Some commanders are going to go right to the front line. You and me, this is us. We want to be in the front line, acting, doing the thing in response to the battle at hand. So 1s, 2s, and 6s are responsive reactive types. That's where we prefer. 4s, 5s, and 9s don't work like this. They're withdrawn. So they're going to hear the reports from the battlefield, and they're going to say, I need to think about this in my tent. And they're going to feel it. They're going to think about it. They're going to try and get comfortable with it. 4, 5, 9. And then they're going to respond to the battle at hand from that interior space. So this is Joey Shuey's work, in part, who you mentioned earlier. But that external focus, the internal focus, that really matters. The last is the 3, 7, and 8. And what Joey Shui did, which was brilliant, was she moved off of the word dependent for 1s, 2s, and 6s, but she did elevate independent for 3s, 7s, and 8s. Because what's really happening with 3, 7s, and 8s is they're like a general who emotionally disconnect from the battle. They are not going to be influenced by the emotions or the pressures of the battle, and they're going to make judgments about what's going to happen from an independent spot where they decide this is what the future is going to look like. And so that's different from 1s, 2s, and 6s who are responding to the battle, and it's right in front of them and they're always doing things. 1s, 3s, 7s, and 8s, your emotions don't matter. My emotions don't matter. We're just deciding what needs to happen.
Yep.
And they do that from that independent vantage point. So I like the idea of the perch, or the vantage point, to describe the distilling process that takes place in stance. And so when you act in the world, what ends up happening is each of the types, your affect actually determines the direction of your energy. So for 2s, 5s, and 8s, you'll be familiar with this. The problem for 2s, 5s, and 8s is out there. What they're fighting is an enemy that is out there. So the 2, their shame is out there. The 5, their fear is out there. The 8, the thing that's going to impose its will on them, is out there. And so 2s, 5s, and 8s are all defensive in the way that they posture themselves, and they engage the world from behind glass, as it were. They're offering what they have to offer, but we don't realize sometimes that there is a very clear shield up for them in which they give, but they give in order to have kind of a radar. Are you trustworthy? Will you care about me? Do you understand what I'm saying? That's how 2s, 5s, and 8s are in the world. For us, for 1s, 4s, and 7s, we're idealists. The problem isn't out there. The problem is actually inside of us. So the 7 is running from their grief. The 4 it knows that they are flawed. And of course, 1s, we can name our, the places that we've broke stuff all day long. And so like the energy goes inward. The 4 will pull others into their feelings. The 7 will pull people into their thinking. The 1 will pull people into action. But that's the place where work takes place, is kind of in this interior space. And then for 3, 6s, and 9s, they focus both directions. So what ends up happening is 3, 6s, and 9s all are trying to create spaces for everybody. The 3s, they want to feel successful, but they also want you to look successful, especially if you're on team 3. So let's just create an environment where we're all successful. I'm going to do what I can to elevate your best self and my best self, and we're going to win together. 6s, the world is going to get us. I want you to be safe, but if you're safe, then I'm safe. And so if we're all safe, let me just create the safe space for us. It's both an outward and internal movement. And then for the 9, I'm bringing the calm. I'm bringing the calm to you because I'm such a generous person, but I'm bringing the calm so that I'm calm. So if you mellow out, then it creates mellow for me as well. And so 3, 6s, and 9s create spaces. And that would be kind of the end of the circle, as it were. They act in the world with those directions in mind, and then they reassess and get new battlefront messages, as it were. I don't know that that's much more, simple than the racetrack metaphor, but that's what we went with. So
no, I love it. I like the racetrack, but that definitely, it clicks, I think, makes a lot of sense. So,
good
job. Yeah.
Thank you.
One question I love to ask is, for those who don't read the book, what are they going to miss out on? What happens if you don't read this book?
Well, I need to make more money. So you're going to miss out on me being a self-sustaining author. That would be terrible. Right. No, what are you going to miss out on? We are trying to push the conversation forward a lot. There was a surge of books in Enneagram world, and they all said the same thing. They are all quoting 2 books and over. And you're like, I have heard this 28 times already in the last 8 books I bought. So big ambition for us is that we're moving a conversation forward. Big idea for us is that we're elevating really essential elements of your type, specifically, again, coping style and affect groups. and trying to unpack these seldom talked about yet super essential elements of your type. So if you're just getting into Enneagram, any one of those other books is going to work for you. That's what they're designed for. All of them are being written to beginners. Our stuff is being written to folks who really want to use the tool. If you have had the electric shock of realizing this is my type and I see the world differently now, our book's for you.
Beautifully said. I could not have said that better myself. So
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm actually stealing that from Katie Whitlock, our friend, who said when she came to Enneagram, it just rewired her brain. And that was very helpful for me.
That's awesome. Good job, Katie. Good job. Okay, we'll end with this. You mentioned it earlier, but I want to end with it also. Where can we find the book and when does it release?
It's exclusively on Amazon. You can get it on physical copies. Paperbacks are going to be like $20. The Kindle's $9 and the audio version is $9. If you go to aroundthecircle.org, that's our website. We have a ton of stuff there. Not only can you get the audiobook for free if you're a member, but we're going to have a handful of videos that just kind of unpack some of the ideas with visuals and more of a teaching element. All of our full interviews are there, which would include our interviews with the most informed people that we know who are each of the types. So we actually went through the book material, all 9 questions with the most informed people that we know. And all those interviews are at aroundthecircle.org. And so like, these are like 2.5 hours. The 4 interviews, I think 3.5 hours. She had a lot to say about her 4-ness. The great Heidi, the therapist, who is a delight and treasure of a human being, by the way. But that would be the way to connect with our material best.
I love it. I'll link to that Amazon link for the book, and I'll go ahead and link to aroundthecircle.org. So
presently the Kindle's available for pre-sale, but I'm sure it's the case that here in the next few days, everything else will get uploaded.
Absolutely. I love it. That's all I have for you, Jeff. Anything you want to add before we close out here?
Yes, Kelsey, you've been fantastic. Thank you for letting me just go off. I'm normally in your shoes where I'm asking the questions. I never really get to talk as much as I want to, as apparently it's all bottled up. So just all of this extra energy, it's just because I've been conducting interviews for 5 years and have not yet gotten a chance to go off. So thank you for being such a fantastic interviewer. I appreciate it.
Very kind. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the book. Y'all go check it out.
Perfect.